Welcome to the Jay and Rob Toy Show. I'm your host, Rob McCallum, and we got a lot of toys to talk today. But before we dive in, let me introduce my co-host, the Omega to my Supreme, Mr. Jay Bartlett.
What is up, my good friend? How are you this evening?
I am doing excellent. I am full of toy thoughts, and I can't wait to unleash them. Are you?
Dude, you know I'm ready. Let's get into it.
Now this week I want to journey down to a corner of action figures that not a lot of people discuss. It is the topic of female action figures. Now it's no secret that a lot of action figure lines are designed by boy departments at different toy companies. It's the boys division, it's boys, boys, boys. But of course, not every character that gets released is a guy or a dude or a boy. There are, of course, women in these lines. And some of these female characters, these women characters, are some of the best figures. But how come there's not more of these characters, Jay? How come it seems every time we get a line out there, whether it's based on a cartoon or movie, it's 7 dudes and 1 girl?
Well, I think back in the heyday of the 80s, it was much different than it is today. I think today it's a lot better, especially with stuff like Marvel and Star Wars. Back then, with G.I. Joe, you had 12 originals being released. One of them was Scarlet, the rest were guys. It was just different back then. All this stuff was marketed for kids. I think the turn in all that, honestly, was when She-Ra came on the scene. That's when you kind of started to see everything turn, and all of a sudden action figures just weren't for boys.
There is so much to unpack with what you said in that simple statement there. Everything from G.I. Joe to how it's different now to She-Ra being a pinnacle point. I want to kind of wind everything back because, of course, that pinnacle line that really ushered in the heyday of action figures is Star Wars. And of course, the big female character from Star Wars, the strong woman role model in that series, is none other than Princess Leia. And thankfully, we got more than one iteration of Leia throughout the years. But after that point, I think that's when, like you said, the turn starts to happen. G.I. Joe, when you look at it, there's actually a lot more than just 1 or 2 characters. And the way they treat their female characters is better than most lines, wouldn't you agree?
I would. Joe's done it perfect, in my opinion. When you look at Scarlet, you look at CoverGirl, Lady J, any of those strong female presence, they're right up there with the guys. It's 100% equal. I never felt at one point that Scarlet couldn't handle her own at all. In fact, it was often her and Snake Eyes that would team up with Stalker and just kick Cobra's butt. Yeah, G.I. Joe and Hasbro really hit it out of the park with Real American Hero.
And let's give some props to Baroness as well, because she was a character that was featured predominantly in the cartoon. She was right up there with Destro, like part of the mayhem from the beginning, and I always got excited when she jumped into the action too. And if there was a character that I don't have in my collection that should be, it's definitely Baroness.
Yeah, Baroness was a fantastic character. She was more often than not the girlfriend of Destro, so the two of them were often on the screen together. But I'm thinking of one, Rob, that isn't often mentioned. Now, she's not Cobra and she's not Joe. Do you know who I'm referring to?
Pythona?
I'm talking about Zorana, the Dreadnought. Zorana is a fantastic character in the comic book especially, but she has a really big part in the cartoon as well. She's Master of Disguise, and more often than not as well, she's a double agent. She's a strong female character that's a villain that you often root for.
The fact that I could name another deep cut character, not that Zorana's a deep cut because she's part of the Dreadnoughts, which is an integral group, but the fact that I could name another character just really shows the depth that G.I. Joe had when it came to female characters and action figures that got released compared to other lines. Now, even if we jump to something like Masters of the Universe, there are really only 3 female characters from that original line that had, well over 50 characters. We get Teela, Evil Lyn, and the Sorceress. And that's pretty much it that you have in Eternia for female characters that get released on card anyways.
Yeah. I mean, 3 great characters, obviously. Sorceress guards Grayskull. Evil Lyn is the right-hand woman for Skeletor, and then of course Teela is just in every single episode. All 3 of them are amazing. But yeah, I see what you're getting at. But they corrected that in a few years though, didn't they?
Yeah, I think, you could make the argument that the success and popularity of Masters of the Universe certainly led to the show that you mentioned, and of course the subsequent toy line, She-Ra, Princess of Power. But you know, it's crazy because you almost get the reverse thing happening there when Princess of Power comes out. They went back and they saw that so many girls were playing with He-Man, so they launched She-Ra, and you get amazing figures in their own right that are, of course, all action figures and not just dolls if you want to split hair. And then they give you the token guy in the line, Bo.
Yeah, it was reversed. It was really cool. I remember getting my first She-Ra figure, which was, of course, She-Ra, after you and I saw the feature film in the theater. That was just an awesome Secret of the Sword. It was just awesome. And I just love the story of Adora and how she was captain of the Horde, and you know, she was doing all these things and being brainwashed. She didn't know she was doing evil, and then how she kind of turns around and becomes She-Ra, and then they tie in, you know, He-Man's her brother, and it was so awesome.
Now, I will fully admit that I wanted to have She-Ra as an action figure as a 5 or 6 year old boy, but I distinctly remember my grandparents making it a weird experience for me wanting to go have that character. Now, I don't know if that was the, you know, boys should only play with boy toys and they shouldn't play with Barbies kind of, you know, stigma that there is. I mean, this is He-Man's sister, so I felt okay with it. I remember checking out and coming up with an excuse if I was asked by the cashier. That's how much anxiety I had as a kid, and I still remember that. But I don't remember feeling that way about Teela or Evil Lynn, or even later on playing with like Janine from the real Ghostbusters, or April O'Neil with the Turtles.
The difference being, if I may, is that Princess of Power was marketed in a completely different division. If you went to Toys R Us back in the day, or if you went to Walmart, Princess of Power was in the girls' toy section. It was not with the rest of the action figures. So I remember it being a little strange. You felt kind of a little bit weird, you know, the boys going into the girls' section to find these figures. But they were definitely marketed for females. I remember they had the real hair, they came with combs and stuff like that. So they had doll-like features, but then they had the badass armor and the swords and shields and stuff like that. I remember also picking up She-Ra, and I didn't really feel weird about it. But I do remember that the package to me was really strange because it was pink and it was very girly, to be honest. So maybe a little bit weird.
Now, it's easy for us to go back and say, this is how I would have done it. So let me throw it at you, Jay. Do you think that it should have been marketed towards girls, or do you think it should have been marketed towards boys, given that, you know, the vast majority of characters and even the play sets and, you know, mounts that came with it, the horses, were all very much rooted in the doll tradition and beauty style, you know, driven play?
That's tough to say. I think if they treated She-Ra in Princess of Power line like they do today, which is just all under Masters of the Universe, and there's a subset called Princess of Power, but it's all in the Masters card backs now, it would be very different. But like you said, they created She-Ra and all these wonderful characters because all the girls were playing with He-Man.
I think after that point, the next big line I got into was the real Ghostbusters. Now, there were 2 female characters that stand out to me from that line, and of course, it's Janine Melnitz, who I think in Wave 2, with the Fright features, got to have a proton pack of her own and become a Ghostbuster. And then, of course, there's, I think, the Wave 1 villain, Granny Gross, which, you know, had those typical Kenner play features where you squeeze the arm, and in her case, her mouth opened wide, and it was like a crazy specter. Did you have those characters?
I'm trying to remember. I know I had the first wave. Aside from Ecto 1, I never had Ecto 1 or the Firehouse. I'm pretty sure if she was in the first wave, I'm pretty sure I had her. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and Janine came out later and she had the pink coveralls on, and she, after her was Lewis, who had yellow and stuff like that. But it was cool because she was such a prominent character in the cartoon show that she was begging to have an action figure, and they finally released her. And I didn't hesitate at all to ask for her for Christmas. Like, she was part of the lineup. And I remember so many missions, you know, if a Ghostbuster got tied up from a ghost, because the ghosts are allowed to win, then Janine would have to go along for the ride, or, you know, her and Egon would go off or something like that.
Yeah, she was completely equal with the rest of the guys, you know, and I never thought of her as any less. In fact, all these characters I never thought of any less, and I'm trying to think of why that is, and I believe the answer is rooted back to Star Wars. I saw Star Wars when I was very young, and Princess Leia was such a strong female that from the age of 2 or 3 on, that's just the way it was. So I never really saw men and women as different in that kind of way.
And that's the same thing for me, except for my first very strong female character was She-Ra. So much so that I remember when I got She-Ra, I instantly wanted to have Wonder Woman as well from Superpowers, because she is such an iconic character there. And again, a cool figure, totally awesome, totally fit in with the rest of the heroes. But I always wondered, how come there aren't more girls? Specifically with the superheroes, not like any of the other lines, but like the DC superpower stuff. I wondered how come there weren't more girl superheroes. Especially on the Marvel side with Secret Wars, we didn't get any women at all, I don't think.
I believe you're right. I can't answer that. Again, the 80s were a different time than right now. So I think a lot of this stuff, you know, only guys, you know, read comic books. That was kind of the mentality. So we'll make all the staple male characters. And of course, you have to have Wonder Woman regardless, because she's right up there. You know, when I think Justice League, I think of 3. Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. Those are the first 3 that come into my mind, so you have to have her. I was always bummed that we got these really bizarre superpower vehicles and we never got her invisible jet. I think that's a real lost opportunity there.
Now with the other lines, like Masters, we got Teela and we got, of course, Evil Lyn, so they kind of offset each other, one for the good guys, one for the bad guys. Do you think that it was like a token requirement that like, hey, Teela and Evil Lyn are prominent figures on the show, we better put them in the wave? Because there was obviously enough characters that they didn't have to include them as figures.
Well, their body mold is exactly the same. So if I'm going to get into the toy designers' minds back then, if you're going to have a good female, you have to have a bad female to battle. That's just, you know, that's how I think they thought back then.
Hello, my name is Joe, and this is my toy collection. As you can see, it's a pretty big He-Man focus. Let's start over here. This is the vintage side for the most part. And if we go up to the top, this is a Skeletor and Panther 2-pack. This is one of the harder to find gift sets that are put out there. This is the first one of the first ones they put out. The 2-packs and these type of sets are highly, highly sought after, more so than the individual mint on card figures. So, but to still have this and like this in this box with the amazing artwork, it's one of my favorites. This is actually from Otto, a former Mattel employee. This is something that Mattel employees were given. This is a Power Sword letter opener with the sheath, which is normally missing, intact, and it says Masters of the Universe on it. This is one of my favorite pieces. We were told that there were as many as 500, but we can't find very many. So I think it's much, much lower than that. The third really, really, really cool special piece in this room that has a fun story with it is Titus. Titus, and when I first started doing this, came to me from Justice Curry, who is well known in the Facebook community and also done a couple other TV series and documentaries. He lives not too far from me, and we both went hardcore into getting these giants. And fortunately, he and I worked together, and we both got our giants around the same time. The cool thing was that it was just a figure. What transpired a few months later then is that we took a long car ride for us from the Kalamazoo, Southern Michigan area to, of all places, London, Ontario, Canada, to pick up an empty box. So we drove 6 hours one way to buy an empty box. It's a fun story, and it's one of my favorite pieces because of the camaraderie, because of the story, and how it all came to be. And of course the giants are hard to collect anyway. So what's really kind of special in this room is this giant display case that we have that has a lot of statues and a lot of things that, well, they're more fragile. So that's why we keep them in here as opposed to in the toy collection. And with that, one of those special things is actually this He-Man store sign. This is the second one I've had. The first one I got was destroyed in shipping, which was very, very heartbreaking. They're not common. They are made of a brittle plastic that does not take much for them to break. So that is one of my favorite pieces, and especially having to go through it twice to get it, it's very, very special to me. For right now, and it'll probably be for quite some time. My favorite piece in the entire collection, as of today, is this bicycle right down here. If you notice, this is French on this side. This is a Canadian released bike that was only made in Canada. It is very unique in the sense that it is a dual branded bike in that it has Tonka and Headstrom on it. Normally it's either one or the other. What's also interesting, as I mentioned, it was made in Canada, is that it is bilingual. And if we look on this side, it is in English. What is also very interesting about this bike is that this is the only known example of it. There's no catalogs, nothing that shows this was ever mass produced anywhere. So I'm hoping that someone can prove it wrong. Find something, tell me what this is, because as it stands right now, all that we can think of is that this was a prototype or a test shot, a mock-up of this is what we're going to want to sell. These are some of those very special things in my collection. This is the smaller portion of the room. There'll be more expanding, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time to do a brief little tour with me.
It's different now. Like you said, it is so much more different now. And I think look no further than the leader of action figures, once again, Star Wars, for all the amazing female characters that get, put out for offering for people to add to their collection. Name some characters from Star Wars, Jay, that are just must-have, female characters.
Must-have, besides Princess Leia, of course, you have Padme, Rey. These are staple characters. Most of the female Jedis are just insane. Luminara and Dooley, Barriss Offee, of course, Ahsoka is now just huge in the Star Wars world. Any of those you have to have in your collection.
And now with The Mandalorian, we're getting Cara Dune is getting, a lot of popularity. Bo-Katan is huge as well. Even Frog Lady, which I don't think has been released or announced yet. Like, it's almost like every character that is a woman in Star Wars is frankly awesome. And you know what? That's wicked. I totally love that we're getting so many female characters, and I'm excited to put them on card and on the shelf. Yes, I'm a shelfer in that respect, but man, they are some wicked characters, and why not? It's so refreshing.
Yeah, The Mandalorian's really doing it. They're hitting it out of the park a lot. I don't want to say most, but a lot of their characters are female. And again, it's when I watch something like Star Wars, or I read a comic book, or watch any of these cartoons, I don't see the difference. I don't see, as if, she could beat him up. I've never thought that way. And I thank George Lucas for that, because that was a really good lesson to learn, when I was young.
Well, that sound means it's time for Action Figure Spotlight, Jay, and we've been talking about our favorite female characters that have been released as action figures, so I want to know what you're going to showcase today.
Well, I'm going to showcase my absolute favorite female toy of all time. I mean, of all time, man. You know how much I love this figure. This is Force Captain Adora from the Masters of the Universe Classics. The thing I love the most, obviously, is the screen accuracy of this figure, but the Flash Gordon-esque 70s garb that they designed for her, I just love it, and that she has a little kind of ray gun pistol. So much detail. The holster is separate. It can move. You can put the pistol in there, and of course, she comes with the sword. It's got the jewel inside and everything. This has been my favorite female figure for quite a long time. I've had it for a couple years now. I think you got this one, don't you?
I do, and it's funny that you picked that figure, because I had to distinctly make sure I did not pick Adora or She-Ra, and then I thought about picking Catra, and I thought any of those three could have been a figure that you picked. And then as I was scanning my shelves, I of course saw my favorite female character. I was just like, this is the most badass female character. It's not a figure I've had for a long time, but it's one I had been searching for decades. And of course, I'm talking about the Grail itself, the Blank. Now, this is from Dick Tracy's Playmates line. The story goes that there was about 3,000 produced and only released in Canada. And they got pulled from the shelves because, of course, when you unmask the figure, you see that it's a woman. And it doesn't quite look like Madonna, but that was the one of the characters in the film, and they didn't want to give away the fact that the blank, which is one of the antagonists, was Madonna. So they pulled them quickly from the shelves, and this has been a sought-after grail ever since. You know, we never had the blank as kids. We couldn't ever find her. The coolest figure by far in my collection. She's just badass. It's a great costume, full of mystery, very, you know, noir, almost like DC's The Question to an extent, but just so cool to have and have her complete with the mask and hat, the pistol, and the case. So the blank. Can't get much better than that character. And it sucks that they pulled her from the shelves and nobody else could really enjoy her for the most part.
And that's going back to, you know, when we were kids and there was no internet and we didn't know, I don't even know if there was action figure publications back then, but we didn't know why you couldn't get her. And imagine that now, you have no answers to these questions. It was just kind of a mystery. That also is what makes the figure so great.
Well, that'll do it for another episode of the Jay and Rob Toy Show. Jay, before we go, one critical question. You have a massive want list of action figures that you would like to add to your shelf. Which is the #1 female figure that you need to have to complete that list?
The #1 female figure I want in my collection is really quite simple. It's one that I did used to have. My grandfather bought this for me a long, long time ago. It's actually the 12-inch Wonder Woman based on the Linda Carter TV show. I remember having it. I don't know what happened to her. She disappeared. I think it involved my dog and chewing her leg off, if I remember correctly. I think so. But that's one that has so much sentimental value to me and really brings me back to that time with my grandparents. So that's #1 with a bullet.
Sentimental reasons for me as well. If I could add one figure, it would be a carded original Scarlet. My daughter's name is Scarlet, and if I could get something like that in the collection, I think that would be a really cool piece to leave to her someday. So if she needed to sell it off for something that was important to her, then she'd have something cool that was tied to her namesake.